hours after the U.S. military captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro on Saturday, President Trump made it clear in a press conference that the U.S. operation is about, at least in part, control of Venezuela's oil.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
The capture of Maduro and Trump's comments come at a time when even a country like Venezuela, with one of the biggest oil resources in the world, isn't a sure bet for attracting major oil companies. Many oil companies have been bruised by their past experiences operating in the country. The global oil market is currently facing an oversupply. Oil prices are below $60 a barrel. And long-term projections for oil demand are unclear as the world shifts to more electric vehicles. Trump promises to, quote, run the country, unquote, and make way for U.S. oil companies in Venezuela. What are your thoughts, given Houston is widely known and referred to as the energy capital of the world? Are you in favor of President Trump running the country? Do you think he can improve the oil situation in Venezuela? And joining us now to discuss is University of Houston energy fellow Ed Hurst. Ed, welcome back to Hello Houston.
Hi, Celeste.
Hi.
Frank.
And you can join the conversation by calling or texting 713-440-8870. You know, Ed, we've got to ask, what can we expect the conversations, given that U.S. oil companies are public companies? They are not owned by governments.
Well, from the consumer angle, we can expect nothing very quickly and nothing for a long time. Venezuela's production is about 1.5 million barrels a day, exporting about 500,000 barrels a day. That's 0.5% of the global oil supply. Does it make a difference? Yes, it does. Does it make a huge difference? No, it doesn't. The president met with MBS of Saudi Arabia, 10 weeks ago. I'm pretty certain that Venezuela was on the agenda. The president trying to make sure that there would be no bad impact on oil prices. In other words, higher oil prices from cutting off Venezuela's access to global oil markets. And the Saudis can produce, have spare capacity of an additional 2.5 million barrels a day. They could do this. So we're not going to see any tremendous impact, not at the pump. Houston, well, we have one oil company that's doing business in Venezuela. Chevron had its license extended to do business 5, 6, 7 months ago by the Trump administration. So that's when we knew something was afoot. But Chevron produces about 150,000 barrels a day. And on a production sharing agreement with PDVSA, the state oil company of Venezuela. So before anything could happen, even with Chevron, who's there would have to be negotiations. Chevron would have to be assured that not only can they bring money and personnel in, they could get it out again. Mm-hmm. And as you pointed out in your lead, many of the oil companies in the U.S. and other countries have been burned by Venezuela. And the president has left Maduro's regime intact, only essentially removing the president. Mm-hmm. 55, 60 years ago, Venezuela was producing 3.5 million barrels a day. It was the second or third wealthiest nation in this hemisphere. Since Chavez took over and followed by Maduro, most of those revenues have been diverted to maintaining the government and the regimes. The UN estimates that 90% of the Venezuelan population, or those that are left, live in poverty. More than 8 million Venezuelans have left, live in other countries. So this is not something that's going to inure to the great benefit of the United States or to the benefit of the oil companies. Keep in mind that the price of oil this time last year was about $80 a barrel. Today it's less than 60. And so U.S. oil producers have been taking a bath because they've lost $20 a barrel in revenues. Their costs are up because of the Trump steel tariffs. None of them really have the capital to deploy to go down to Venezuela for what appears at the moment to be an extremely uncertain return, something that even if billions of dollars are expended over the next 3 or 4 years, we won't see any profits start to flow out for 3 to 4 years. That would be after the Trump administration. There are a lot of moving parts to this.
Well, and Ed, I understand that the oil down there is a type of crude oil that is much harder to pull out of the ground, and I guess even harder to turn into oil that most people use.
You can actually go in with a bulldozer for some of it and scrape it off a lake and put it in heated tankers. It's asphalt. But U.S. refineries along the Gulf Coast can process that. Keep in mind that Citgo, until really just weeks ago, was a wholly owned subsidiary of PDVSA. So Venezuela has been exporting crude oil to its subsidiary in the U.S. for refining for many years. We've replaced most of that crude that used to come from Venezuela, and again, the heavy crude that would come from Mexico, with up to 4 million barrels a day from Canada, and also the occasional tanker full of heavy crude from Saudi Arabia. It's not that big of a deal, but since it's a global oil market, just the idea that, well, hey, we're going to go down and turn on the spigots and get an extra million barrels a day that will benefit the U.S., that's not going to happen. It just does not happen in the global oil market. An oil trader would cut his mother's throat for 5 cents a barrel. Once that tanker is on the ocean, nobody's going to sell it to you at a discount unless somebody's holding a gun to their head. In essence, pretty much the way we're doing with Iran and Russia and Venezuelan crude going to Cuba, for example.
Ed, though, and I think you kind of touched on this, can we trust the official reserve data provided by the Venezuelan government?
Oh, absolutely. The reserve data there is very well known. That oil is easy to access, and as Frank pointed out, it's not technically easy to get access, but we can see it. That's all well known. This is not a lot of oil that's buried miles deep beneath deserts or severe rock formations. This is pretty accessible. It's just challenging. It's dirty. It requires infrastructure. And for 20 years, the infrastructure that would get this oil to market has deteriorated. We're going to need to send hundreds, if not thousands, of professional oil field personnel into Venezuela. We're going to need manufacturing, fabrication, build pipelines, build pumps, build rail lines. The entirety of the oil supply chain in Venezuela has deteriorated dramatically. And 50, like I said, 55, 60 years ago, they were producing 3.5 million barrels a day. Today, that's 1.5 million.
You are listening to Hello Houston. We're speaking with University of Houston Energy Fellow Ed Hurst. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. James from Conroe is on the line. James, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your question or comment?
My question, and it could be a comment, is that I think Machado, Nobel laureate Machado, won at least 2/3 of the vote less than a year ago. And I think that she should be guiding Venezuela into the future. Marco Rubio couldn't even answer that question when he was asked. And so we don't have a good history of running countries. But yet, what we do very well is not learn from history. So, yeah, very, very well. Yeah, and so my question, and I think it's a capitulation to Putin for keeping the same people in control. So my question is, couldn't Machado run the country and still all the oil negotiations and the future of oil in the country still happen where the country does benefit? And that's my question.
Ed, Machado in charge, you think we're still good for the oil?
Well, that's a great question. Machado was not elected president. She was not allowed to run, but her party's designee won the election. We don't know. We need to have the rule of law restored in Venezuela. I'm not certain that the U.S. can dictate this, You know, from the president, we're hearing that the U.S. is going to run it. From the Secretary of State, we're hearing we're going to apply coercive measures to Venezuela. Will shut down their revenue producing regime. You know, these are at odds. Um, Certainly, the president in his first administration had a Secretary of State who understood oil companies, Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil. We don't have that in this administration. Um, this is, I believe, and I may be taking a bit of a leap here, but it appears to me that the administration is looking at this as a financier would take a look at a hostile takeover on Wall Street. This is not that simple. This is not, say, ExxonMobil acquiring BP. This is a sovereign nation. It has laws, it has rules, and it has millions of people. And we have not done nation building very well. You
Ed,
know,
let me jump in
Eisenhower
here.
rejected this in 1956, but George W. Bush went ahead in Iraq, and we wound up with a failed nation. And Iraq's never been able to restore its production to former levels. President Obama did the same thing with Libya, and Libya is a failed state. Oil production from Libya has declined. The U.S. has really not made money from this, even from the 1989 collapse of the Soviet Union. The CIA came to Houston. We met with them. The oil field services companies did. They were puzzled. Let us know what you learned when you go into the oil patch. Russia needs to rebuild its oil and gas facilities. Well, they took advantage of U.S. investment at that point, and then threw all the companies out sometime later. We don't manage this very well. This is not like acquiring a subsidiary of an oil company on the stock exchange.
Okay, Ed, let me jump in here with this. And either I am a conspiracy theorist or a wise sage. Those are your only two choices here. But isn't this possibly about something totally different? It has nothing to do with the oil, but more about the finance behind it. That's something with BRIC nations coming together and trying to create a new currency, a digital currency referred to as the unit, which would then trade oil prices in a large portion of the world, cutting out the U.S. and the petrodollar, and that is really what all of this is about, because it would unstabilize our economy and could lead to bigger issues down the road, and that this is an early attempt to stall that by taking Venezuela's oil reserves. Am I a conspiracy theorist? Am I making any sense in this, or could this be at play?
I don't think any of that's in play. It doesn't make any sense. The dollar will trade for what people want it to trade for. We have more dollars in circulation abroad than we do domestically, and that actually came out of the Cold War with the euro dollar. The Russians needed hard currency, and they were delighted that we provided a lot to Europe, and it stayed there. The euro bonds. So we've had lots of folks talk about, well, the dollar will be displaced as the reserve currency. That would make things more difficult for us. Well, it actually might impose a bit of a fiscal discipline for us. Keep in mind that when we went to Iraq, President Bush and his Vice President Dick Cheney, formerly the CEO of Halliburton here in town, and many members of Congress thought, well, we would just take the Iraqi oil for our own. That didn't work out very well. It didn't save us any money.
Yeah.
In fact, we added trillions of dollars to the national debt because of that. If we had taken the amount of money spent on the oil adventurism in Iraq and added that to the pump instead of to the national debt, it would have amounted to $1.20 a gallon for every gallon we've consumed in the U.S. over that period of time. Bush would not have been reelected if the cost of the Iraqi incursion had been put at the gasoline pump. Obama would not have been reelected.
But
That's not counting the tens of thousands of killed and wounded.
what is the BRIC alliance, and should we be concerned with that?
No, this is Brazil, Russia, India, China, looking to have an economic bloc similar to, say, what the EU has. Should we be be concerned about it? Not at the moment. Are they going to sell things to the U.S.? Absolutely. But the fact of the matter is, with the tariff war that Trump has put in place, their exports to the U.S. have dropped dramatically. And so what the Trump administration has done is it's wounded our ability to do business abroad. China is seeing a wide open market in South America, a wide open market across Africa, a wide open market across Southeast Asia. The U.S. is being just priced out of it by our own leadership.
And we have a call. Ernesto from the Galleria is on the line. Ernesto, welcome to Hello Houston. What's your comment or question?
Yeah, I think I can hear a little bit of this tone shift with the previous comments, but I think my concern was that it feels like we're discussing how this might benefit the city, how Houston might or America might benefit from basically what we've done in Venezuela, which is taking someone's leader and apparently going to be running the country in the oil now. Just seems that that's not the right conversation we should be having. How that benefits is when the real conversation should be, why have we done this to begin with? There's all forms of legal norms that have been violated here. International laws have been violated here. This should not be happening. We should not be talking about how we're going to split the spoils of a theft that we have just allowed to occur. This is being conducted with our tax money under our name. We should be ashamed of this, honestly.
We talked about this in our first hour. This is, and we pivoted the second hour to talk about the effects this might have on our city and our country. But you're absolutely right. I mean, what happened there, by most counts, was a dramatic line in the sand. Don't you think, Ed?
Mm-hmm.
It is, and that's certainly a discussion more for the hobby school and for the law school. It's just a red herring to say we're doing this for oil. If that really is the primary motivation for the Trump administration, it's severely misguided.
We have a call from Glenn from Cyprus. Glenn, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question for Dr. Hirsch?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for taking my call. It's always a pleasure to hear you, Dr. Hirsch. You're a really informative source on this program for years and years. My question regards refining capacity in the United States. Are there refineries that can handle Venezuelan crude? It's been many years, I think, since we've processed any. Do we have the capacity to handle that sour crude from Venezuela at all?
Oh yes, we do. Keep in mind, Venezuela was refining that crude via the Citgo subsidiary that they owned. Also, keep in mind that Lyondell closed their refinery on the ship channel last year. 100-plus-year-old refinery that's geared to processing heavy crude, and they realized that it wouldn't be worth the almost $1 billion they were going to have to spend to upgrade it to keep it operational. We have a number of heavy refineries in California, heavy oil refineries that have been closing, but we refine 5 to 6 million barrels a day of this heavy type of crude. And today we get about 4 million barrels a day from our Canadian allies, our closest allies. Some comes in from Venezuela, some from Mexico, and the occasional tanker of the Saudi heavy comes in.
Ed, what do you think it will take for U.S. oil companies to find interest in Venezuela again?
It's going to be very difficult to do it. The U.S. oil patch is, as an asset class, the worst performing asset class in the S&P 500 for the last 12, 15 years. Wall Street doesn't advance capital to the publicly traded oil companies. It doesn't earn a rate of return. They're much better off putting money behind Microsoft or AI or Cisco Foods. And so these companies, which are currently getting squeezed because of lower revenues in the U.S. and higher costs in the U.S., don't have the extra available capital to go on a 3 or 4 year speculative venture. Mm-hmm. They need to see a way to profits. And currently, Maduro's been out of control, if you will, for 48 hours. Uh, we don't know how this is going to shake out.
So what kind of position does this then put Chevron in, given that it is still in Venezuela?
Well, Chevron's still doing business. They're doing about 150,000 barrels a day in a joint production agreement with PDVSA. They should be able to continue on. They will have an inside track in terms of negotiating with the state oil company to develop further reserves and bring those to market. But I don't think Chevron's going to be too anxious to be running hundreds more professionals and billions of dollars down to Venezuela until we know what the government's going to look like. We don't have a sense of normal government in Venezuela yet, and that may be months or years away.
We have a call from Kevin from Sugarland. Kevin, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question for Dr. Hurst?
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, and Dr. Hurst and the rest of the team here. I found this very fascinating over the weekend, certainly watching this. For me, at least, it was, gunboat diplomacy in modern times, per se. In a weird way, we did this with Hawaii, with Samuel Dole and the rest of the American plantation owners when they were there and took out the Queen. And then the long arc, going through the rest of Central America, Nicaragua, of course, Chile with Allende being pulled out in the 70s and Pinochet coming in, and ultimately, of course, Iraq, for that matter. I am not going to be the first one to apologize for Maduro. He was an absolutely horrible individual, I think, for both the country and the people and the surrounding neighborhood. But for me, at least, it opens up a Pandora's box, right? I mean, the rules-based international order that we have had kind of kept a lid on, what would otherwise be rogue behavior by countries that we wouldn't want them doing things that we don't like by setting an example. For me, at least, I wonder what is to stop China from effectively instituting some terrorism charge or something of that nature on the president of Taiwan and taking her in. Same thing with, Russia and Ukraine and many other places where you have a very large power and a subservient power in the same neighborhood. Those are my comments, and would love to hear any response to those.
Thank you, Kevin. Ed.
I don't disagree. There is scuttle, if you will, running around Washington that the hemispheres, if you will, have been divided. This has been a concern that Taiwan has had for a long time, that the U.S. would just abandon them to China. Without the EU stepping up, Russia would have taken Ukraine by now. The President Trump has repeated his desires to go after Greenland and now Cuba. I'm not certain that he's, that could very well be the game that's being played. It's hard to say. I'm an energy economist. That's a different sort of bucket of analysis and pay grade going on.
Thank you, Ed.
University of Houston Energy Fellow Ed Hurst. Again, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you, Celeste. Good to see you.